Don't cross the stream.
Anybody else want to negotiate?
Not make a sound until I tell you to run.
Are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests?
Don't need any help from me, sir.
That's right.
Hello and welcome to Is It Streaming, the podcast where we pick a movie from the endless queue and help you decide if it's a hidden gem, a waste of time, or worth adding to your watch list. Today we are discussing the 2025 genre-bending Southern Gothic supernatural horror film, Sinners. I'm your host, Kevin Rossi, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Silvia Graziano. Silvia, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing just great, but you know what? Our trio isn't complete without our other co-host, Mr. John Mostich. John, are you there?
I am here. How's it going? Everybody happy?
Yes, I'm very happy to be talking about this film today. So,
Happy, joy.
all right, John, before we start getting into some background of this film, can you let the listeners know where is it streaming?
Currently streaming on HBO and Netflix, but it's probably going to be coming to a platform near you because there are recent events.
That's right, recent events, which we will get into in just a little bit. So, Sinners is the brainchild of writer, director, and producer Ryan Coogler. The film stars Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld, Miles Canton, and Jack O'Connell, and not to mention the fantastic Delroy Lindo, among many other fantastic actors. The film had a budget of $90 million, and production took place in April to July of 2024 under the working title of Grilled Cheese.
I love that. I heard that today.
So
Isn't
great.
that great? As we just said, this film is directed by Ryan Coogler and stars Michael B. Jordan. This film marks their fifth collaboration to date. Their filmmaking journey began with 2013's Fruitvale Station. This was followed up by Creed in 2015, Black Panther in 2018, the sequel, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, in 2022, and finally, today's film, Sinners. Now, guys, do you think this is kind of like a Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio collaboration? I'm trying to think, like, what other, like, director main star collaborations do we have? I mean, maybe, was it Tim Burton collaborates with Johnny Depp a lot?
Yeah, that feels like a Scorsese and DiCaprio and maybe even a De Niro kind of collaborative.
I mean,
Great,
Yeah,
great
right,
pick
yeah.
for that one.
Wes
Yeah.
Anderson has his troupe, right? Well,
Yep, that is true as well.
and I guess Adam Sandler, a lot of very good actors that all work with Adam Sandler a lot.
Yes, so speaking of collaboration, Coogler also brought on cinematographer Autumn Durald Arkapaw, who he worked with on Black Panther 2. And come to find out, Coogler prefers working with similar crew on all of his movies. This led to quite a rushed writing process for Sinners. Coogler only had a few months to write the film. He had the idea in late 2023 and early 2024, but only had 2 months to pen the screenplay before many of his preferred crew members would be moving on to other projects. Here's Ryan Coogler with some backstory on coming up with the idea for the film.
Sinners came from a very personal place, man. Like when I was finishing up my last film, Wakanda Forever, we spent a little bit of time in Byron, Georgia, which is like a small city a few hours outside of Atlanta. But while I was there, I saw a cotton plantation. I'd never seen the plant before in person, and that experience made me think of my uncle, who was from Mississippi, grew up in his early times as a sharecropper and eventually fled the state, came to California. We had a very close relationship. And he passed away in 2015 as I was finishing up my second feature film, Creed. I never got to see that movie, and I never really properly mourned that loss. And one of the things that he and I would do together, listen to blues music. I was trying to figure out what my next movie was gonna be. And I was in the kitchen with my wife and producer, business partner, Zenzi, and a Howlin' Wolf song came on called Wang Dang Doodle, which is a crazy song about all these dangerous characters in the South that get together and decide to throw a party. The movie just came to me. It kind of all coalesced in that moment. And I told Zenzi, I was like, I think I got my next idea for a movie. And more than anything, I found it was an opportunity for me to write a love letter to cinema, to all of the things that I love about going to the movies and watching movies with an audience. That feeling that drove me to want to become a filmmaker. I'm maximizing all the relationships that I formed with all of the folks that helped me make those movies. And I'm kind of just like cashing it in, on this picture. And at the same time, it's the first film that I've made Like, since I kind of know who I am, I'm a dad, a husband, a business owner. In many ways, it's the most important movie I've ever made, and it's straight from me to audiences.
Man, those are awesome back, like behind the scene photographs there. One of the things I love about working on horror movies is seeing the guy with the cuts on his face just standing there and everybody's just ignoring him like it's just a regular day. And that's just so cool to see the part of the process. Why I don't think filmmaking with AI and everything else is ever going to go away because it's such a community experience and doing all those crazy things. So, but really neat how he came up with this idea so quickly and then but kind of found his roots in the idea. It's really, really, fascinating.
I just love how personal it is to him too. Like that photograph of his grandfather, cool looking guy. And that's what filmmaking is about. I think when you're like, when you feel when something moves you, right? You have this passion, you have a story that needs to come out. And you really do feel that with Sinners. Like you feel how personal this story is. And man, it's so layered. It's gorgeous.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the crowning achievements of this film is really just how layered this film is. And, as we said before, it's genre bending. This could have been a standard vampire horror movie, but it's far beyond that. It's really culturally relevant and it really does a lot of teaching in this too.
It's almost not even a horror movie. It's such 2 different movies. The non-horror part is so beautiful to me. It's so hard for me to watch this because the horror part I don't like, but it is such a beautiful movie. It shows Mississippi such a beautiful light and in a terrible light. It's just really well done.
And now, listeners, there's a special reason why our outfits are going to change later in this episode. Something very special happened just a few days ago. Sylvia, can you let the listeners know what just happened?
Well, you guys know this, right? I mean, when we talk about film, when we talk about awards, when we talk about fashion, we got the big one that just happened, the Oscars.
Yes, the 2026 Oscars. We had to go back and re-record this opening for this film just to make sure Sinners got all the recognition for all of its accolades at the Oscars. Sinners set a record for the most nominations in history with 16, breaking the previous mark of 14 by the films All About Eve, Titanic, and La La Land. Sinners went on to win 4 Oscars: Best Actor for Michael B. Jordan, Best Original Screenplay for Ryan Coogler, Best Cinematography for Autumn Durald Arkapaw, and Best Original Score for Ludwig Göransson. Hopefully I didn't fuck your name up, Ludwig. But yes, the film unfortunately lost out on Best Picture to the film One Battle After Another, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and starring Leonardo DiCaprio. We'll have to talk about that later and see if that is justified or not. Now it's time to finally dive into this film. Sinners currently has a 7.5 rating on IMDb, and the logline for the film is: trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. Now, Sylvia, why don't you set the stage for us?
Prologue, fade in. Match strikes, flame whooshes. Carved images come into view. Musicians etched into wood by ancient hands. Irish filly, Choctaw firekeepers, West African griots. Over this, we hear the voice of Annie, a Hoodoo root worker and estranged wife of Smoke, voiced by Wunmi Mosaku.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death.
The cool part about that whole start is where they start, right? They start a long time ago, like a million years ago, and later on we're gonna find out like that is so important that they literally it's so funny how movies will tell you the answer and you don't know that they're telling you the answer. You're just going along for the story, right? And so the very opening scenes where they're just doing the chalk drawings and things, and you're seeing all these ancient times, and soon enough we're gonna figure out that this is about all times, you know, from beginning to end.
It's definitely an evolution that we're seeing here. Yeah. And as I mentioned, we're starting at the end, but what does the end really mean?
Or is the
So,
end the beginning, right?
in
It's
this
like
particular story.
it's like a full circle
Exactly,
situation.
right?
And also, too, I love how Ryan Coogler really has a taste for these introductory scenes. This opening scene is very much like the opening scene in Black Panther, where they have like those little molecules that are moving around. It's almost like sand molecules, and they're doing all these awesome 3D sculptures and stuff. And they're giving you the whole backstory on Wakanda and stuff. It kind of reminds me of David Fincher, who always has very awesome opening sequences that are like almost title sequences in some of his films. But Ryan Coogler definitely has an eye for it.
It's
Sure,
also
yeah.
interesting, like, this is exposition, but it doesn't feel like exposition. It's really kind of like an abstract exposition. They're not saying, like, the 2 young men met and they moved to Chicago. It's more like, "Hey, guys, times happened and evolutions happened, and there was always." Do they get into music here? Do they start talking about music in that section?
They do. Yeah.
So they get right
Yeah.
into, oh yes, piercing the veil of the worlds through music, and they do so much exposition, but you're just kind of like, I don't even understand what you're talking about right now. So that's fascinating how they do that.
Yeah, it's almost like a History Channel type of thing where they're giving you so much backstory, plus like the artistry of the carvings is looking so cool. And I also just love Annie's voice. It's very like soothing, but almost also very ominous sounding voice where it has a lot of weight to it.
A voice for the ages. It actually reminds me of the voice from the woman from the Warriors. Yeah, the movie The Warriors, where there's the voice with the
Hmm.
mouth with the microphone is just very sedate and piercing and solid and strong, very strong.
And also timeless, right? Like you don't know from what time this voice comes from.
Exactly. Yes, it's definitely a timeless voice, and like you said, it's not really giving us a time frame of when this movie is taking place. At least not in this beginning scene. But following this opening scene, we see Sammy, one of our main characters, holding a broken guitar and entering his father's church.
My son has felt the call of sin. But the good Lord calls upon us to be fishers of men who sin and show them the way. I want you to swear to me and before this congregation to leave those sinning ways where they lie. I want you to promise right now. Drop the guitar, Sammy.
The sound design and the editing on that
Ooh.
is really good. Yeah, I mean, I haven't listened to it with headphones, I don't think, yet. And just listening to the headphones, I was like, man, that's pretty jarring, even though I've seen the movie like 5 times.
You hear that heartbeat, that sound, that background, that like sound engineer there, that design is so, oh, it hits you right in the chest. And I love the play of the visuals where you see his father being mirrored by this dark entity, right? That we later learn is Remick. But we have this sense, I think, like what's so brilliant about this particular editing in this opening scene is that it really does give the audiences the idea that like are these two connected, are these two figures connected, father and this other darkness that we see with these flashes, because their actions are completely mirrored, their hand gestures are mirrored, which is so cool.
And this is where we find out, oh, by the way, this is a horror movie. This is what we're all been waiting for, my favorite kind of movie, right? When we get those bursts. Now, we've watched this movie about, I think I must have watched it about like 6 times, I think. And that might be conservative. I might have watched it more at this point, so I can very easily watch all of those flashes. Not my favorite kind of genre, you guys know that. Um, but the juxtaposition is what I think is really cool because that room is so clean and sanitized, and the father is so, got on the white robes in the white room. And I also know how they actually lit that space, with some giant lights in one side of the room. So there's actually no lights in that room. It's all just balanced light, which must have been really brutal with so many white surfaces to try and light from outside and coming in and just get the right balance. And then that juxtaposition of those quick flashes of basically blood and darkness is all how I can describe it, where you know, like, oh, some stuff has gone down. It's also to me interesting because they go one day before. So this whole movie takes place over 2 days. That's it. There's not like, oh, 6 months
Yeah.
later this happened. It's like they got the whiskey and stuff. They got the place. Everything happened. Then all chaos broke loose, and everything happens in 2 days.
The other thing that I like about this scene is not only are they setting up that this is a horror scene, they're also putting out the question, right? It's the whole thing of religion being good or evil, right? It can do both. And also music, the blues is almost he's giving Sammy a choice here, right? He's saying either follow the good, which he's saying is the church, or follow the devil, which is the blues music, which will be a theme throughout this film.
No, it's put down that guitar, right? And I like they stop there. They don't answer that question, right? Just say,
Yeah. But the guitar is significant. Guitar equals evil. Guitar equals sin,
it's funny
So,
because at that point that guitar is barely a guitar, so I don't think
yeah, it's just
you
literally
could be
the
like,
arm. You're
sure,
like,
man, I don't. This is junk now. This doesn't do anything.
All right, so now we've introduced one of our main characters, Sammy. And now we're going to meet the real main characters of this film, the Stack twins. Now, very different pacing from the rest of this film so far. I mean, a lot of, even in the very intro where Annie is doing that voiceover, we're seeing a lot of wood carvings. It's giving us a full story. This is just kind of a slow crane shot to the left, slow dolly shot, but it's setting up a lot of stuff here. What do you guys notice?
So first, I noticed there's two guys that look identical. Is that strange or what? They look so much alike. I can't even believe it. I think it's actually, obviously it's Michael B. Jordan and Michael B. Jordan. Both guys are the same person, just wearing slightly different outfits. I think noted in the blue and the is it burgundy kind of a hat. Um, and I actually kind of think this scene tells how we always talk about the pacing of a movie, and we've had that chaotic opening where the church was also crazy, and then all of a sudden we have this nice slow shot. I think they're doing it for multiple reasons. I feel that the director is saying, here are the two characters. I think most people know who Michael B. Jordan is, and I think it's a way for the audience to get used to these are two different guys played by the same guy and almost marvel at, "Oh, wow, look, it looks like they're passing a cigarette to each other." They did a brilliant job. Um, so that's one thing I noticed. I know Sylvia always talks about the vultures, the turkey vultures in the background, and the sense of danger that's coming. But here we don't have look at, which one is in the burgundy hat? I forget the
stack.
is that Stack? All right. So we're also told the story of who these two guys are right here. Stack, relaxed, leaning back, everything's gonna be too cool, and Smoke, who is standing a little more rigid, not completely rigid, but more attentive to what's about to happen. I think they're telling the story of these characters. And I have to comment, this building behind them has got these beautiful blues in it that are just so serene. I love the soft, different blues that are in this shot. It just feels so comfortable.
And actually, now that you mention that, John, it's like the haint blue. So blue being that color that protects against evil spirits. You notice even the character Annie, who we'll meet later. We heard her earlier in the opening monologue. She wears a lot of the haint blue. Her house is painted that sort of blue. It's very similar to this barn behind them. So it is essentially that color wards off evil spirits, which is very interesting.
And I'd love to say that the car, like the beginning of the movie, they state, like, Clarksdale, Mississippi, and they give the year, I think. I don't recall what year they said, probably 1940 something.
1935.
1935. Okay. And the car, would tell that same story, so I'm kind of curious why they actually decided to give the title across it, but they did. It's fine.
And the other thing that you notice here is that stacks, or is the one in blue, correct, is smoke, correct? And red is stack.
The one in blue is smoke.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So you also notice that Smoke's hand is shaking and he's taking the cigarette from his brother Stack, which we'll realize further in this film is that Smoke is definitely dealing with some type of trauma from the war that he has been in, which is World War One, and he has his brother roll his cigarettes for him. The little subtle hints there in this scene. The other thing that I love about this, like Silvia loves talking about, is the vultures. I noticed in this scene there's only 2 vultures. Later, when we get our introduction of the villain Remick, there's going to be 3 vultures. But I thought that was a little nice tidbit where they're changing up the amount of vultures. And also, John and Silvia, you both brought up the fact that there's a really cool color palette to this film. And we're going to hear from costume designer Ruth E. Carter. She's going to tell us more.
We have this color palette that was given to us from Ryan. You know, it has to do with that this is an American story. So we wanted to bring in red, white, and blue, starting with Smoke and Stack, Stack in red, and Smoke in blue. But beyond that, you know, when you look at clothing from this time and you see a lot of workwear, you know, people wearing blue overalls, blue coveralls, blues, prominent. And then, you know, they weren't manufacturing clothes in so many colors either. So you did get like primaries, and to see this palette of red, white, and blue.
The thing that I really like about that I didn't quite realize upon initial watches, obviously you pick out the red and the blue from Smoke and Stack, right? And you see that hate blue. But the white, the very prominent whites, even in the church scene, and it was purposeful. It's red, white, and blue because this is an American story. Uniquely American, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean the color palette in this movie is phenomenal. Again, I'm gonna say 100 times, I really don't like scary movies, but as far as the way they shot this movie and the look of each scene, it was so well crafted. It was so well put together. Looking at the color palette choices, a lot of films are made. Most films are made deciding on color palette, but this film clearly, throughout the entire film, made sure each scene looked like a perfect blend of the colors that they were looking for.
So we come to find out that Smoke and Stack are looking to buy an old mill, and they're meeting the current owner, who's a large man named Hogwood.
Here she is. He moved a ton of timber a month back in his heyday. Workers lived upstairs. Say, what are you fellas planning on doing with the place? Y'all wash these floors? Yeah. What was on them? I thought y'all was dead set on buying the place. More time I spend with y'all, the less sure I am you boys are serious about it.
Ain't no boys here. I just grown men. A grown man money and grown man bullets.
Again, a lot of stuff happening in that short scene there, really packed in the details. What are some of the things you guys notice?
So I have to go back to the lighting here. This whole thing is a Rembrandt picture, right? It's like a moving Rembrandt with selective patches of light, and there's a thing in filmmaking where you can light somebody softly from one side and have kind of a triangle of light on the other side. They don't exactly have it in this, but they're pretty damn close. Obviously, you have moving characters, so it's hard to keep that going, but just how they have very select patches of light. You probably don't see about 30% of the frame. They just give you lighting softly around those characters, and then they use the back windows to highlight that somebody's moving into frame. They especially when one of the brothers walks behind Hogs. What is his name?
Hogwood.
Hogwood. Somebody walks behind Hogwood. He almost steps through a crack of light, and we kind of makes it very obvious, like, okay, this guy may be in real trouble. And we don't know this movie yet. The first time you're watching it, you don't know, oh, they're just going to talk to him basically, and maybe a little threatening, but you don't know, are they going to jump this guy or what's about to happen? And they all have their guns. They all have their bravado up. They clearly know this guy is part of the clan, and he clearly knows it as well. So, just this standoff that they have. I do have a question. They ask about the floors and what was on these floors before. Is there any? Do you guys have any idea, like what what that question was for?
It's a foreshadowing,
I
definitely a foreshadowing
yeah.
to the what we'll come to find out later when Remick, one of our main villain, will reveal that the KKK would murder people here, and there was a giant bloodbath, and there was blood all over the floor. So it's kind of a foreshadowing, seeing that this mill will be the main set piece of the film, and obviously in the second half of this film, quite a lot of blood will get spilled on this floor again.
Yeah, it's basically a slaughterhouse, but the interesting thing is that this is an old barn, right? So everything else looks probably used or dusty or not really attended to, but the floor is very clean. It's suspicious, right? So, of course, the smokestack twins are like, "So what's the deal with the floor? Did you just wash this recently? What was on it?" So, definitely some foreshadowing there.
Absolutely. And this is the first time that we actually get to hear them talking and we start to notice the differences in their characters, the cadence, the mentality. And here we have Michael B. Jordan talking about developing the smokestack twins.
The process of kind of like going from one character to the next. Like for me, it was a lot of music and catchphrases and things of that nature. A body position or a stance, that I worked through to kind of establish the two of them, and locking into that, day after day, you start to create your own rhythm and routine. Smoke wore his trauma differently. He kind of closed up a bit. So Smoke is a man of few words. And that's what we kind of understood a lot amongst identical twins. Usually, twin brothers that, are around each other a lot, one is more dominant in certain areas than the other. If you're always with your brother and your brother usually does most of the talking, you naturally don't talk that much because, your brother's taking care of most of that. So finding out those little details was a lot of fun and very informing on just the process. But Smoke, had a heaviness to him that I kind of wore that took time to get off. And Stack was a lot lighter. He smiled through his pain. He smiled through his trauma. He talked his way through it. So he had a lot more things to do and say and to deflect, to not sit still and let those feelings and those traumas kind of catch up to him. So Stack was always kind of like, he's always on the move, always kind of fleeing from things.
It's pretty amazing how much work he had to do to really be able to create the nuances between the two characters. I mean, it's true that Stack smiles a lot easier. He definitely is more free with his words, and Smoke is more inside, more closed off. The trauma, as we spotted too in the very first scene when we're first introduced to them, we see it physically, right? When he's holding his hand, when he's looking at his watch, he literally has to hold his watch hand with his other hand to kind of control the shaking. And so there we see how these two fit together so well. They have a symbiotic relationship. They are there to help each other. And you can see that there is a bond and a lot of love, but they have two very distinct personalities. It's very nuanced. And when you first look at them, you're like, they're exactly the same because I get it. Michael B. Jordan is playing these two characters. But really, when the film starts to play out, these characters are living their life, you really do, you can distinguish between the two of them. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I don't want to say I don't agree. I agree, but I do feel that they were so subtle between the two of them. I honestly, till you said his hand was shaking, I didn't notice the shaking hand. I've watched it 6 times, so I'm sure it was there. Um, I just, for me, distinguishing the two different characters, I could tell there was a difference. Like earlier, I could tell how they were standing was slightly different. But there's so much action that starts to take place, and so many relationships that take place that I couldn't. really disseminate all the time which character was supposed to be doing what with what person or how their relationship were working with each other. So, yes, I do agree that in there, they definitely had different characters, but I could never really fully figure out which one was which other than the color of their hat. And when they took a hat off, I was in trouble.
The wardrobe was definitely very helpful, I think, when scenes weren't as evident to be able to distinguish between the two.
As a really stupid person, I would have loved it if they wore very different styles jackets or something so I can go like, "Oh, yeah, he's the one in the long tail coat," or something. But the hats, yes, I just would lose track of who's wearing blue and who's wearing burgundy.
Same hairstyle, same everything, right? And even after watching this film, 6+ times in the last year, as viewers saw, we were already talking a few times about who's Stack and who's Smoke, and it doesn't really help that they're called the Smokestack twins. It's just like always a
Yeah.
combination of both of them, and they're doing their best. They're giving one red, one blue. The hats are different, but yeah, no different hairstyles. Obviously played by the same character. They not if one had a giant scar on his face, then you'd kind of know like, oh, that's this character or that character.
There is a distinction between the 2. It's actually their teeth. So, I
Oh, okay,
believe
yeah.
that it is Stack that has a gold tooth, I believe. And it becomes more noticeable, I think, later in the film, but I remember I was like, "Oh, here we go. This is yeah.
That makes complete
Here's
sense.
another distinctive feature."
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Stack is the one that likes dressing with the very nice suits. Uh, Smoke also looks nice, but yeah,
Yes.
Stack definitely cares about his appearance far more than Smoke does.
I do think you made a good point on that, Kevin, where the name of Smoke and Stack, it's cute, but then it becomes like confusing. Uh, if it was Dale and Peter, I would like, okay, two different names or two very not distinct together names, but Smoke and Stack, it's like, well, one's the beginning, one's the end, and then that also I think leads to just a little confusion for my dumb brain.
I can see how that can be confusing, especially when you're not like, because you're not like paying attention to this with these like crucial, like examinatory sort of eyes, But and yes, when their hats are off, it is a lot harder to distinguish between the two of them. I do remember that Stack has the gold tooth, and there is a distinct, the color also distinguishes sort of their style and personality. So Stack wears the red, right? He's got the fedora too, so he's got a little bit more
More
bravado to
flash.
him. He's louder, definitely more flash. And he essentially, both of them, they actually represent two different mobs, technically, based on where they come from. So Stack wears the red, the fedora, representing more of the flashy Italian mob, right? Which we do know later on that Smoke and Stack do run into both Italian and Irish mobs. They have a connection with them. Um, and Smoke wears the blue, the flat cap, and representing more of the Irish mob. Little subtleties, and with the colors
Do you think the
represent.
mobs, like, saw the other brother with the other mobs and got all confused about it too? They're like, "Yeah, that's my brother." But you can tell because 'cause he's got an Irish hat. He's with the Irish guys.
Yeah.
They do that. They'll do that
So
old trope where they just switch each other. It's like when the twins are dating some girls and then they'll just swap for a date and do the whole trope. Yeah, absolutely.
unbelievable. Yeah.
So now we've been introduced to most of our main characters here, but the twins are going to be on their way to pick up their cousin Sammy, who we're introduced to in the opening scene. This is the first time they've seen each other since the twins left town, and Sammy has some questions.
So tell me about Chicago. I heard they ain't got Jim Crow up there. A black man can go where he wants.
So, boy, you can't be believing anything that you hear. Time to fill your head up with this make-believe. And me and your cousin, we gonna give it to you straight. Chicago ain't shit but Mississippi with tall buildings instead of plantation. And that's why we came back home. Figure we might as well deal with the devil we know.
I love that scene. I love it because you also distinctly see the personalities between the two as Smoke is talking. You see Stack just smiling. There is this idea. This is that free sort of like, yes, they're talking about something very upsetting, the racism that still like lives up north, right? Just because it's tall buildings doesn't mean it's really any different than the South and the plantations. Um, And seeing that the contrast, right? So like Smoke is always very serious, and Stack, even talking or listening to a story that has sort of this darkness, will still be able to smile, still has a levity to him.
Absolutely. And just the beautiful scenery. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. You have the
Gorgeous.
cotton fields in the background. You can see the dust kicking up, and it's, the brothers in the front, Sammy centered in the back. It's just every shot in this is just so beautiful. And I would love to have been on location when they were shooting that.
So these are some beautiful wide open shots that we see here. And having lived in Mississippi for a short time through my high school and college days, those are really very realistic. The huge skies that you have in the Mississippi Delta. As a matter of fact, we used to play against Clarksdale High School in my my high school football
Oh,
team. Oh yeah,
really?
oh yeah,
Look at you, John.
big
Wow.
rivalry. Nowadays, you'd have a lot more houses, but not many more houses. Obviously, you would have the roads would be much nicer. But yeah, the this is very true. The Mississippi Delta has that very large, wide open feel to it. And as they go down the old dirt road at the very end, I say that's realistic too, because there'd be like different places between farms that there would be like setups of little pockets of trees that people would park in, and I'm not gonna go into more detail on
I
that.
love it. Well, come to find out, the Stack twins have done some parking in this too. Nothing nefarious, but they have hidden a truck, and they are going to discuss their plans.
Shit, Cracker showing up late already got us behind schedule. I'm thinking we just set up tonight. Open up next weekend.
Nah, fuck that. It's gotta be tonight. Grand opening, start this shit with a bang.
Or we start with a misfire.
Look at that sky. That's a mighty fine day to be free, ain't it? Our own juke joint. For us and by us, just like we always wanted.
Only chance we got if we split up. Well, who gonna watch the truck when I'm in there talking to the chows?
Nigga, just let them see it's you.
We've been gone a long time, Stack.
7 years ain't long enough to forget about us.
All right. Watch this fool, make sure he don't get in no trouble.
You big enough to take me now, huh?
I'll do what I can.
Nah, you'll do what you told. You keep your eyes open for anybody staring too long. This nigga don't know how to watch his own back.
So now we're really getting into the motivations for Smoke and Stack returning home, buying this old mill. And it seems like, the main motivation here is freedom, right? Social freedom, economic freedom, having their own place.
I guess then you kind of start to wonder, like, why did they go to Chicago in the first place? They were kind of causing trouble in this town. They wanted some freedom. They wanted to go up there, and they found out what they said to Preacher Boy, which is Chicago is no different. It is the same thing. We're back here. We want to put a stake in the ground and get our own juke joint, make our own money, make everything work. But also, I'm sure they're probably a little afraid that the Irish and Italian mob are going to come after them at the same time too.
Yeah, I mean, and they make a point saying they'd rather come back here to deal with the devil that they know. So already tells you like that they know that this may not be easy even coming back home. They know the evil here or the hardness here a lot better than what Chicago has going on.
And John, you brought up a good point about their backstory, which gets covered in this film. So I think the initial reason why they leave, right, is that we find out that Smoke actually killed their father because their father was an abusive father, mainly to Stack. And one day, Smoke actually killed the father. And I forget whether or not, maybe Silvia, you know this, whether or not that instance actually led to them leaving. And we know for a fact that they go to war, which during this time, it would have been previous, 1918 would have been World War I. So I'm curious, was that the incident that caused them to go off and join the war?
I'm thinking likely. I mean, they don't ever mention how old they were when they, murder their father, or when Smoke murders their dad. Um, I'm assuming it was probably they were right around that age of going to war because, as we know, World War One, these were like children fighting in that war. So we really don't know. I mean, it's likely that that is what sort of led them to flee the house, go to war. Could have technically been anywhere between like 14 and 18, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah, I would say that that's perfect timing, right?
So,
So they're probably somewhere in between 32 and 38, somewhere in that range
yeah.
there. And obviously, they also talk about that the Smokestack twins have quite a reputation in town for not being the nicest of people. It's not somebody you want to cross. Many times in this film, when they are first introduced to people or people realize who they are, they visibly back away because they are afraid of them. So I'm also curious too. So when they came back from the war, do you think they returned to Clarksdale before moving on to Chicago? Because people do seem to know that they went to Chicago. So it's either that they just have such notoriety that this town was kind of following what they were up to even after the war, or maybe they actually returned home and then went off to Chicago.
So, having lived in Mississippi, and this is something that I believe is true. There's nothing that happens in the world without everybody in town knowing everything, and there's also,
Yeah.
like, 20 rumors that may or may not be true. I'm sure it was kinda like a bit of a Paul Bunyan story, right, where they were off in Chicago and they'd hear like, "Oh, I heard Al Capone, made them their top-notch person. Oh, I heard they did this and that." Um, so my, experience is that small town Mississippi, to all my friends in Mississippi, for better or worse, there's lots and lots of talk of all the things that are happening in the world. So, in my view, the story would be told to say people were keeping track of what Smoke and Stack were up to because they had hit the big time. It's kind of like they became rock stars in a way. And they were, big fish in a small pond in Clarksdale, and then they become small fish in a big pond up in Chicago. And I'm sure everybody in Clarksdale was talking about them.
And I think with that, John, I'm thinking in my idea of how this narrative works is that after the war, they did come back home. They went back to Clarksdale. Trauma, dealing with sort of the horrors of the war, uh, I think made both of them decide to flee again. So it was either like death of father, right? Murder of father, go into war, but then you have to return home and face your demons, face your ghosts. And they didn't want to do that. So they went to Chicago and started a new life there and realizing they were getting into trouble very quickly there too as well. So
So now that they returned home, in our next scene, we're going to see that they actually return to downtown Clarksdale. And we can see that there's quite an apparent difference from one side of the main street to the other.
Have food, drink, music. Cause y'all gonna be playing.
What's up? Cards, dice, even got a roulette.
I have no animosity towards the colors.
Mama, Daddy wants you. Thank you.
Used to be what they had their summertime.
I mean, this scene is so great. Well, I want to first ask you guys, why do you think we're following Lisa like this? What is the point of this tracking shot?
To me, it's to show that there are two sides to this town. To me, we're tracking her across the street to show that, oh, we're in the black person shop. She goes across the street, and immediately you see that there are 100 white people over there. The signs are all pretty. All the goods are stacked nicely, and that we're showing that there are two sides to town, that the black side and the white side.
My very first watch, I wasn't quite sure what I was really seeing. I was like, okay, I see that the Chows can move freely, right? Like this is a family that can move freely from one side of the street to the other. And for me, I look at this and I think of it as like a masterclass in visual storytelling because it gives you a history lesson without a single line of dialogue. Lisa Chow crosses her family's black side of the store to the white side across the street. And it's literally a 1 minute and 7 second tracking shot. And what we see here, like you were saying, John, is the invisible borders that shape their daily life. Like I said, the Chow family can move freely. And then you can basically see who can't. And it's just this quiet moment where you get to see how everything about privilege and belonging and survival uh, is captured in this town, in Clarksdale, in this area. And you do see the differences between the two sides of the street, right? Like it's the white side, the whites only is like you see all the food is stacked in a really beautiful manner. It's organized like very cleanly, and then when you cross over, there's a little bit more dust on the side, on the black side of the street. You definitely see the cotton, I think, in one of the carriages in the background. Um, it's a little bit what they're trying to show is that the care and the money is not put on that side, and the care and the consideration is on the white side. And so I just love that it's all done in this single shot, tracking shot, and there's no dialogue. You just have to rely on the visuals.
Yeah, it's an exceptional amount of time. Like, time is so precious
Yeah.
in film, so you have to have a reason. They could have just shown her, you know, say, "Sure, I'll get mama," and then meet her over at the store and say, "Mama, go to the other store." Or, she could call her up on her cell phone. I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of different ways they could have done that, but that took a full minute of time to
Yeah.
display that the Klan probably is still alive in that town, that there's segregation.
This is the Jim Crow South. We're definitely in the heart of that, and it's just defined so eloquently. It's very distinct in this one particular shot because otherwise you don't quite see it so much. So I find this scene to be really pivotal, and it's just done very well.
Yeah, it's really a masterclass in visual storytelling, like you said, Sylvia. So now in the narrative, we have Smoke. He's over there procuring a sign. He's also getting some other supplies from people in town. And we have Stack and Sammy are on their way to get some entertainment for the juke joint. And Stack finally gets to hear Sammy sing the blues for the first time.
Traveling, I don't know why the world I'm here. Traveling, I don't know why the world I'm here. Woo, boy! Oh, the woman that I'm loving, she sure don't feel my care.
So this is where we kind of start to really. This is the first time the Preacher Boy has sung, right? This is his first singing that we hear. But Miles Catton is the guy who plays Sammy, and he is phenomenal. When they selected him, I always kind of think of actors. Sometimes you have a visual representation, but you also have a voice, right? You have a certain voice that character should have, and you might have the perfect looking person, but they have a high pitched voice or a low pitched voice, and it's just not right. His voice is so soft and subtle and relaxed, and hopeful that it fits the character so perfectly. I absolutely love this selection of Miles Catton for this role because his character is such a pivotal character. He is the conduit for a lot of the situations, but he is almost always in the back seat. He's almost literally, well, in this case, right? We just saw he's in the front seat. Earlier with the two
Yeah.
Smoke and Stack, he was in the back seat. He's almost always the one that's learning something. He's the one who's not experienced. Like in the superhero world, when we're learning about a character, he's the one who doesn't know his powers yet, right? He's got to learn more about himself. He wants to grow, and right now he's just becoming this character. And to me, it all starts with this character's voice. How soft and genuine his voice is.
I think that was a perfect analogy that you used, that superheroes, and come to find out, Sammy is almost a superhero, or at least has a superhero power with his singing. And come to find out, Sinners is the debut film for Miles Catton, who plays Sammy, and it was quite a process during casting in order to find the right actor for the role. And here's director Ryan Coogler telling us more.
Finding our Sammy in the film was like, it was a thing that would make or break the film. You know, you had to believe that this kid had the talent you know, that would attract this type of attention that it does in the film, both in the community and supernaturally. We knew that was always gonna be the hardest thing. So that was the thing we got started on first. We were looking for Sammy before we had a script. And we looked everywhere, man. We read incredible actors and musicians from all over the world, man. We get tapes from Paris, we get tapes from the continent. It was insane. You know, Miles sent in a tape from New York, and he was like in his basement or something with the lights out. You know what I mean? He didn't know what he didn't, you know, you got a little bit of a glimpse of him, and he just heard that voice. You know, and it was instantly like, you know, you never forgot it. When he got time to read his pages, he was far and away the best of all of the folks. Even though he had never acted before, you could tell he was green, but it was green in a way that, like, you know, hey man, maybe we can do something. You know, so we brought him out for a chemistry read with Mike B, and we brought Ludwig, our composer and executive producer on the film. We brought him to the chemistry read as well, so Ludwig could kind of fill him out in terms of his musical abilities and his ability with the guitar. He had to learn the guitar for the movie because he's a pianist. And yeah, man, he just continued to impress us.
So first of all, I'm now calling Michael B. Jordan Mike B, just so I sound like I'm super cool.
Yeah.
But man,
yeah,
holy moly, I did not realize until my 6th viewing of this and going into the details that this was his first movie. He doesn't have any movies upcoming on IMDb. This is his only film to his credit right now. And he is such a phenomenal musician, but also actor. And I can only imagine where you haven't done any acting, and then Ryan Coogler, director of Black Panther, like a cultural phenomenon, is like, oh, why don't you just come out? We're going to have you do a chemistry reading with Michael B. Jordan. Like, no big deal. Like, absolutely unbelievable.
Also, like, the idea that, like, when Ryan Coogler's talking about the fact that he was just so green, right? No acting experience. Like, he was a musician, but here he is, like, on YouTube, you know, in a dark basement, like, recording his music. The innocence really, you see it transferred onto, you know, into this film. You see it in his personality and the way he engages with the characters, and the knowledge that he starts to get in this film about who he is, learning about the superpowers he technically has. It just works so well. I think that innocence, the fact that he was so green, really does cater to his character of Sammy. It's great casting. It's brilliant.
And he is nominated for a BAFTA Rising Star Award, as well as he actually won the Best Young Performer Award with the Critics' Choice Award. I don't think he's nominated for any Oscar nominations.
I don't believe so, no, fortunately.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. He is phenomenal. I think there's certain roles that are just perfect for certain people. I guarantee when they first read with him, I can understand why the director was like, yeah, he's perfect. Let's just do this.
And they also said that they knew that this part was going to be so difficult to cast that before they finished the script, they were like, we have to start casting this, because Ryan Coogler has a certain set of crew members that he likes to work with, and he wanted to do this movie very quickly. So he only had 2 months to write the script and turn it in. So during this 2 months before he even finished it, they're out there trying to cast for this role of Sammy, because all the other crew members had movies that they were going on to, and he only works with a certain. So pretty tight turnaround for this script, and kind of a miracle that they found Miles Catton. And, you know, I think it really speaks to how good of a director Ryan Coogler is, because they always say you can judge a director by how he directs like non-actors or how he's directing children. I think it worked out really well for having someone that was this green, that he could literally mold this character. So now Stack and Sammy are looking for other musical entertainment for the Juke joint, and they arrive at the train station. And this is where we're introduced to Stack's love interest, Mary, played by Haley Steinfeld.
You know I waited for you.
Shit, well, I don't know how in the hell you gonna do that.
Because you told me you loved me.
Man, well, I told you to stay the fuck away from me too, but I guess you didn't hear that part, huh?
I heard you. I heard you loud and clear, but then you stuck your tongue in my coos and fucked me so hard, I figured you changed your mind.
Keep your voice down now. It's not exactly how I remember it.
Oh, it ain't. Remember falling asleep with your head on my chest? Leaving in the middle of the night without a fucking word?
The hell are you doing back here, Mary?
I buried my mama yesterday, Stack. Figured I might see you and smoke there as much as she looked after you both. But I guess y'all love lasted as long as y'all could get something out of her.
You right. That's all she was. Food, warm babe.
Rotten hell, Stack.
Yeah, I will.
Another brilliant scene there. A lot of exposition happening there, right? But it's not done where it's forcing it down your throat. It's actually very beautifully written. And obviously, Haley Steinfeld is such an amazing actress. The first thing I ever saw her in was True Grit, which she was phenomenal. And she was like 13 or 14 years old. And obviously, in this movie, she plays a very strong female character as well. And man, she's really just murdering this scene.
I absolutely love how they interact with each other. And you're right, Kevin. There's so much exposition in this, but it's done so well. It's so seamless and not forced. Like this feels like a true conversation between two characters that have a lot of history.
Now,
It's
And
I'm not sure. Do you guys know, were they together previously? Yeah, I can't really tell from that conversation if they were. And I think one of the
It's very subtle hints from Haley in that scene. Yeah.
I think this is one of the first of 3 or 4 scenes where they get extremely descriptive about sexual acts, and and I think it's very also interesting because when you watch old movies, which this is set as kind of, it feels like an old movie, but they never had this kind of language back, in those old movies. The director could have put this in on a street corner. He could have done it in a store, but he decided we were going to have a train pull up. There's no real relevance to the train. There's nobody getting
We
off.
don't know if she's getting off of it. They don't. Yeah, exactly. There's no transaction with the train happening. It's not like they're going to pick up someone getting off it. They're not getting onto it.
I think he just was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this at a train station? Wouldn't that feel really cool? I guess it is a point where they're in a transitional phase, like a train transportation you could go with. Metaphorically, it works very well. But the time and the money it took to make this special effects train, even though it was a special effects train, um, was amazing, and it really added so much to that scene to see the man playing is he playing the harmonica, the blues harp, down by the train station, looking for money. But again, he could have done that at any street corner, and it would have been fine. But this was just that much better. It's a beautiful choice.
this conversation, these two people, like this is not a conversation that you would normally hear in some of those older films. There's definitely a more sanitized version of romantic situations or spats. But here we hear like we have a true, honest conversation of what probably these two people would be really saying to each other at this time. But with the backdrop of the train, it has that feeling of old Hollywood where a lot of the romantic settings take place on trains, near the train, on the train station, someone departing, someone arriving, missed connections kind of thing. So I think it is actually really brilliant to actually set it at a train station.
And now that we have Stack and Sammy arriving at the train station and Stack meeting his long lost love, now it's time for Smoke to go home. And now we are introduced to his long lost love interest, Annie.
I've seen men die ways I didn't even know was possible. I ain't never saw no roots, no demons, no ghosts, no magic. Just power. And only money can give you that.
You fool. All that war and whatever the hell's he been doing in Chicago. And you back here in front of me. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain that work. How you know I ain't pray and work every route my grandmama taught me to keep you and that crazy brother of yours safe every day since you've been gone.
So why those roots ain't work on our baby then?
I don't know.
Such a powerful scene. Given that exposition there about the child that they lost. But I love that she feels like she has all these superpowers, that she's kept him safe this whole time using her, throwing bones and things like that. But he's such direct comment back to her. It like literally stops you in your tracks. Why couldn't you save the baby with it? So powerful.
Yeah, and her response to that too, you can feel, you hear the sadness, right? like the disappointment that she feels like, I know I failed, but for some reason it works for you. So I'm going to keep going and keep doing what I'm doing. And that mojo bag that he's wearing becomes important later on in the film as well.
Yeah, and I love the dichotomy of this scene where he is saying, I've been on planes, trains, automobiles. I've been in war. I've seen people killed. And he's like a man of the world, right? Every physical thing he's a master of. And meanwhile, you have Annie, who is into spirituality and the supernatural. And it's this battle that they're having through their dialogue here, right? And then even when she starts speaking about, how do you know it wasn't me that kept you safe through all those years? And then the like there's almost like echoey voices and almost like a dark ambiance that comes in through the sound design. And then as soon as he hits her back with how come that didn't work for the baby, everything quiets down. And then what do we hear? We hear little birds chirping. It's such a
Yeah.
it's fantastically designed from the sound designer. It's really a masterclass.
Everything about this scene, there's even a moment, I think it happens right after this because she takes the mojo bag and refills it with the roots. And the music is actually composed and timed perfectly with her lighting the match. It's just so everything is so intentional in every scene. It's nothing is wasted. The dialogue is there's no throwaway dialogue. Everything is super important. Their connection is quiet and honest, and I absolutely adore their relationship.
And that speaks to his character, right? He's not the one that's always up there and is flashy
Right.
as Stack is, right? He's a more subdued character. And they did a great job of, first of all, writing the characters to match really well, because obviously Haley Steinfeld's character, Mary, is very outspoken, will get in your face, will talk about lurid sex acts in the middle of a crowded train station. And meanwhile, you have these other two characters that are very subdued, but they'll also battle each other too, but in a much more distinct way than the other couple.
You know what it is like the thing is Annie is so connected to the earth. I mean, she is a woman of spirituality connecting to, earth, wind, fire, all of this and and knowing herbs and they're grounded. They're a much more they feel like a practical kind of couple even though there's spirituality around them. There's something that's a little bit more grounded in the way that they communicate and are connected.
So this scene was the first time that we were introduced to the character of Annie and her role as a practitioner of Hoodoo. Now we have a clip from Professor of Religion and Black Studies, Yvonne Chereau, and she's going to give us some backstory about Annie and the culture of Hoodoo.
One of the main figures in the film is the conjure woman. Her name is Annie. The conjure woman in African American culture was the nurse. She was the healer. She was the businesswoman. She was the first in the enslaved community of women who sort of took charge of this spiritual and this material culture that we know as Hoodoo. Hoodoo is not only a spiritual tradition. Hoodoo is as much about material things, physical artifacts. I was very happy to see the reference to High John the Conqueror. High John, particularly in the slave community, became a symbol for a kind of powerful plant spirit. It is a root that people carry in order to achieve good luck. It is a root that's good for healing. We know from the biography of the great Black statesman Frederick Douglass that when he was an enslaved boy, he carried the root in order to protect himself from danger. We know that gamblers carried the root. We know that people used the root as a power symbol. That is present in the film in different moments. The idea that spirit and material come together in these artifacts.
I love the character Annie. I think that she's more than just a supporting character. I think she kind of connects with sort of the ancestral continuity, history, spiritual authority, and she really is at the core of this film the moral and emotional center of Sinners because all of her choices, her internal strength shape very important moments in this film. And I think that having all that intelligence is that she really moves the story along. And the one thing is that, she's the one who gives us the history. She's the one that gives us the insight to understanding who these vampires are. With all the tension that she has and the dynamic between she and Smoke, with all of that pain and heartbreak, there is still a lot of affection between the two of them, and I think she just is more than just a supporting character. Also just the actress like Wumi is just phenomenal. She delivers this character so well.
Absolutely. And she plays the archetype of the wise man on the road, right?
Exactly.
And we see that right from the very beginning of this film. And like you said, she is such a heartstring and through line throughout this entire
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, she also has like the closest bond to the next world
Yeah.
because I think she could almost say like she'd be more than willing to go to the next world to be with her baby. But she stays behind to stay with, forget if it's Smoke or Stack at
Smoke.
this point.
Yeah.
Smoke,
Smoke,
thank
yeah.
you. To stay with Smoke. And like she even says, like she's protecting him because she couldn't protect the baby, but she's still like at any moment she'd be more than happy, I think, to go to the next world. But yeah, she's definitely the narrator or the person that says, "Oh, by the way, these are hates and these are vampires and
Yeah.
these are here's the rule books."
She's you know what? She's the smartest woman in the room. Smartest person, really.
And speaking of vampires, we're going to be introduced to our villain here, the vampire Remick.
Back up.
Yeah, I gotta help. I thought I could trust them, but they try to kill me.
Slow down.
Who's trying to kill you?
Choctaw.
Sure wasn't just some fair-skinned niggers. Ain't no Injuns around here for miles.
Oh, God. Oh, they took my wife. Oh, God. I'm a coward, ain't I? Hey, I got gold. Them dirty engines meant to rob me. They ain't get all of it. Y'all can have it. Just don't let them hurt me no more.
Personally, I think this is one of the best scenes in the entire film. Not to mention just how beautiful this scene is. The introduction of Remick, where he's jumping into frame, giving the sense that he is flying and he's landing. And also, too, he seems so sincere when he is speaking to this couple that's pointing shotguns in his face, and you really start you have the feeling for him. You have empathy and remorse for him. It's a very powerful performance.
I didn't have a lot of remorse for him because he looked over and saw the Klan robe on the chair, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I can use racism to get in here." I didn't like the guy at all right off the beginning.
Well,
I would say that it has a good turn, right? Where he's very sincere at the very beginning, and then you see his motivations because they do that great POV shot, right? And he's like, "Oh, this is my into this
yeah.
little shack."
Oh, hey, I can just feed on their hate and use that, and and get in good with these KKK members.
And of course, this is the first time that we're bringing up gold too, right? The allure of gold as an in.
Yep. And he mentions that he's married. He has he has his ring on and everything. So what would you have? Why would you doubt this man, right? Like you think he's telling the truth. He looks pretty beat up. So you've kind of like, yeah, all right, sure.
And the introduction of the Choctaw Indians here, which really adds a great element, right? Because everyone else is kind of in this closed off environment that we're seeing. We're seeing the Smokestack twins come into Clarksdale, but these are the outside characters, right? They're going to speak about the horrors that they've seen, and they're giving the warning to these people immediately, saying, we need to do something about this. He's not who he says he is, and if he's in your house, we got to act now.
To me, again, above the characters, we have this beautiful streak of blue light that's on the ceiling. Again, this film does such a beautiful job blending in these beautiful blues, all different kinds of blues throughout it. And it just, the shape of the ceiling almost looks like rays of light because they're kind of spread from small to wide, from back to front, and it just feels very spiritual what's happening as this no good Nick walks up to the front door or stumbles into the front door. But also, I mean, when you said he like kind of falls down, I mean, when you're watching the movie, this is a very big change from the whole rest of the movie where we've been meeting people and having these soft scenes and learning about people, and all of a sudden this guy just slams into the screen. It almost is it's not almost, it's jarring. And the color palette also in that scene completely shifts to a lot of browns. It's a very brown open field. So when you first see him smoldering and everything, we've lost all of our blues, I think, and it's much more like it just greatly changes. I do believe, do they change the aspect ratio at that point too? I believe
This
this
is the
is where
one
they
that's shot in
changed the
IMAX.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
they
yeah.
changed the aspect ratio to make it feel much wider and much more open in that particular shot.
And not to mention what else is happening in this scene, right? Sun is setting.
The other thing to note about this scene, which is like it's so exquisite, and like you said, John, the blues are gone. We're now working with sundown, and it's brown. It's a little bit darker. Shadows are being created. And what we see over the home, right, is when the Choctaw are approaching the house, is we see 3 vultures now circling, and 3 being a sort of holy number, but vultures being more unholy. So it's like that unholy trinity that obviously some foreshadowing right there.
And come to find out, Remick's going to have a trio or a trilogy of his own here. And this is such a beautiful sequence. And we have a clip from director of photography Autumn Durald Arkapow talking about shooting this scene.
I mean, a scene like that, you're always going to have to organize it really well with all departments because it's magic hour, right? It's sunset and then it's the blue hour after sunset. So you can't shoot a scene like that in that perfect time, right? You'd have to do it over a few days. So luckily we had 2 days to shoot it. We shot it for 1 day and then we went back to complete some work, which allowed us more time to get in camera. And it's really about the weather. You can get very unlucky in places like, New Orleans, because really strong weather can come in and kind of take your blue skies away from you. So those 2 days we shot that, we were very lucky to get sunny days, because in the script it's important to see the sun break the horizon and what that means for the storytelling. When I do VFX, I always make sure there's a reference in the camera, because if you're going to be doing some sky replacement or trying to match other shots that were shot earlier in the day, you always want to give VFX a reference of what it should look like in camera. There are shots in the sequence that the Choctaw come and they're looking and watching the sunset drop. Those are all in camera. Beautiful shots. Actually, the IMAX camera jammed right before we were about to shoot that one shot of him looking at the sun on the horse, and you see over his shoulder and you see the sun dropping. So that's for real. We fixed the jam and we literally rolled right before it kind of, set. So VFX, what they do is they're able to do some sky replacement in order to match and make sure that sequence is all consistent, because it's a very long sequence that all has to be at that, within like 10 minutes of when the sun's setting. We always work with VFX like that. It's very important to Ryan and myself that, the images feel real and that nothing takes you out, even though there is VFX. And I think, shooting this type of format, you want the format to sing and you want as much as you can to be in camera.
I think they did a beautiful job blending visual effects with, background walls, and obviously they with the 2 Michael B. Jordans having to do multiple shots. It just did a masterful job of making sure it all felt very natural. It didn't feel at all like they were doing any kind of CGI anything. It had that old Western feel for a lot of it.
Club Juke opens, and Mary, our love interest of Stack, arrives at the juke joint to have fun, and then she meets Sammy.
What are you?
What am I? I'm a human being.
Oh, that ain't what I meant. I meant more like...
I know what you meant. My mama's daddy was half black. He raised her to keep the Klan from killing her. You know my mama delivered the twins.
Really?
She saved Stack's life after he got stuck in the army. And after she died, my mama nursed them like they was her own.
The thing I love about that scene is she picks up that Sammy, his eye line is going behind her, right? So she knows either Smoke or Stack, and I think she thinks it's Stack, right? And so she starts talking shit about them not being there for the funeral, not buying them flowers, then come to find out it's actually Smoke. So now she's met both brothers.
Yeah, and she can distinctly tell it's smoke too because of just the delivery, right? Like Stack would never talk to her like this. There's a totally
Yeah, she
different
doesn't even
tone.
need to turn
Yep.
around.
I do think that this is just an opportunity for them to show that Sammy, Preacher Boy, is again taking a back seat. He's trying to kind of help out a little bit, but at the end of the day, he's not making any decisions. He's not kicking her out or throwing her out. He's basically like, I don't think this is a great idea. But then he waits for Stack to come up and make the decision.
Got you a rich white husband. Got you a farm. Now go home to it.
I ain't asked for none of that. All that shit was your idea. I didn't want no white man. I didn't want to be white. I wanted to be with you.
All it takes is the wrong person in here to see you, or get back to them crackers, and they gonna try to kill you.
What it matter to you?
Somebody out there put their hands on you. They hurt you. Me and my brother gonna come kill them all.
So you'll kill for me.
That's right.
But you still won't tell me the truth. I was young enough to believe you were coming back. I waited. I waited a long time. But I'm grown now, Stack. And I know you never planned to stay. Why can't you just say that?
Say what? Hmm? I love you.
Very emotional scene, and I love the soundtrack of that guitar coming in there. It's a very like 80s type of feel when I'm hearing that, and it's so beautiful. And the great thing about it is we are actually realizing the main motivation for him leaving her. We don't know exactly when, but obviously, she said, "I remember you falling asleep with your head on me, and then waking up and you were gone." And come to find out, it's because he was trying to protect her, right?
It could also be when you were asking Kevin, do we think that the Smokestack twins returned to their hometown after the war or if they went right to Chicago? I'm thinking they came home. This is where Stack reconnected with Mary and then ultimately they jet off again.
I'm gonna have to agree with you, Sylvia. Initially, I was thinking that they did not return home, but it seems pretty apparent that they definitely either rekindled their love or started their relationship at that point. And the great thing about this is we have had this character arc, or this, I should say, this through line of her race, right? When they have that introduction to Mary at the train station, what does Sammy say to Stack? I think some white girl's looking at you.
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Oh, you sure she's white?" And then come to find out through this conversation in the previous one is that he was worried about her because he knew that her grandfather was black or half black. Yeah. And because of the racial blood laws, if you have one drop of black blood in your genealogy, you are considered a black person. And in order to protect her, he was like, you need to marry somebody white. You need to get out of Mississippi. You need to go to Alabama. And he was mainly trying to protect her from this horrible atrocity of the KKK and the racial blood laws that were happening during that time.
I think it's one of the only times that in this movie where he takes off his hat as well. To me, it kind of represents that he's being genuine. He's not putting up a front anymore. He's speaking like not as somebody who has to represent somebody who's super macho or, tough guy with the mob or anything, but he's, taking off his persona to speak straight towards her, speak truth to her.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil.
And then during this scene is where we see the aspect ratio change. And it changes from that wider 2.75 by 1 aspect ratio to the 1.43 for the IMAX. And this is done not with a sharp cut, but it gradually fades from that longer, wider frame to the taller, full screen frame. And then this is a very magical scene where Sammy, just like is told about at the very beginning from Annie, he is playing the blues and he's breaking through the veil of worlds, right? And it's a magical scene. And he, we finally find out, does have kind of a superpower, like John was saying with the superhero analogy. And he starts bringing out all these eras of music from Black and Asian cultures. And all of them start melding together. And it's a beautiful scene where It's a steady cam moving through multiple rooms, and at the very end, it pans up, and the party's so amazing that literally the house is burning down, and they go through the ceiling and out into a wide shot, and you see the entire building burn to the ground, and everyone in the juke joint is still partying.
So what's really kind of cool at the very end of that scene we just saw there is, to me, the vision of the entire building being basically burnt down and smoldering is what Remick sees. Like, he sees straight through the building. He doesn't see a building at all. He just sees the souls that are in there and the fire that he could put into that, and he kind of sees through the veil. The walls are still there, but I think he can see everybody in there. Then a second later, they click right to reality, and reality is there's a barn there, and they have to walk up to it. So I love that while he's singing and the fire is burning and the ceiling is going away, it ends almost like, oh, the whole place burned down. But really, to me, that's Remick's vision of what's occurring there,
Yeah.
as opposed to what's really happening.
And we have a clip here from choreographer Akaman Jones and producer Sev Ohanian with some insight about creating this scene.
So this is the window that allowed for me to bring in so many different generations and eras and cultures of dance. It hands down really was an opportunity to pay respect, honor, and put on display our ancestors, the different music, movement, cultures that have come from generations ago, and not only tie it into the era that the film takes place in, but tie it to our current era where audiences will be watching.
To pull this off, it was genuinely one of the hardest producing challenges I've ever had. We needed to shoot a oneer while we were shooting IMAX, and IMAX film is so thick that it can't fit into a reel like more than a minute or two of time. So that to solve that, we had to find ways to just cleverly hide cuts. Camera would move past the wall, we would cut there for momentarily. Then we had to have a song that would be ready by the time we're shooting. Usually Ludwig is writing these songs after the movie's been shot. So he's working around the clock with Serena to get this song just right. The scene calls for extras who will be dressed in costumes spanning centuries of time. The scene calls for choreography, that everyone's got to hit their marks just right. As they say, the roof is literally on fire because this party is so amazing. Well, to get that shot, our VFX supervisor, Michael Rolla, insisted to pull it off the right way, we had to actually burn the roof. So naturally, that was the very last thing we shot on the very last day of the movie, and we spent a lot of time making it safe and had to ensure that everyone was in the right place in the right time and give it enough time for it to clear out. It was kind of cathartic, actually, to finish the movie with burning our hero set.
Well, that's a unique choice.
That is so cool.
I mean, after a long shoot in the 110-degree weather in the South, I can only imagine how satisfying it was to burn your main set piece, right?
Burn it down, burn it all to the ground.
So those places have like tin roofs. So I wonder what they used for the roof on that building.
John, stop bringing reality into this movie, bro.
I know that's the one thing where this movie kind of loses me a lot is you have to believe in a lot of supernatural stuff and say, yeah, that could happen, sure.
Well, this is a supernatural moment, so.
Yeah, get off your high horse, John.
Yeah, you know my thoughts about the supernatural.
That's true. But, one thing that we haven't talked about, which we mentioned slightly, was the aspect ratios in this film. So this was shot on large format IMAX cameras and 70 millimeter film and 65 millimeter film. And there's two formats to the film that's shown in. One of them is going to be full frame when you're watching on your TV, and one of them is going to have the black bars on the top and bottom. And there were specific reasons why they shot in those different aspect ratios. When they wanted to do the big sky shots and show the landscapes, they always shot in the large IMAX setting, where it really just is a beautiful picture, and it really gives you the scope of the settings. And then other times when they want to really bring you in and it's more kind of intense scene, or they want to bring you in closer, they'll use the shorter, wider shots. And during this scene is where we actually see them transition in a single shot from that slimmer frame to that full screen frame. And I think, actually, I can't really think of any other movie that does that this way. especially inside of a shot like that. I know I've seen other movies where it's shot on IMAX cameras and 60 and 75 or 65 and 75 millimeter, and they switch in between, sometimes in the same scene, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I can't remember a film that actually does it in the same shot like this. And it's such a beautiful way for the cinematographer and for Ryan Coogler, director, to really show that they've mastered this type of filmmaking. And also too, it really just speaks to, the craft of storytelling, where they know that they're shooting on these large formats, and there's not many films where the spectacle is kind of how they shoot this stuff. So bringing the audience into such a technical aspect of, highlighting aspect ratios. Usually aspect ratios are kind of in the background.
Yeah.
It does give scope to it, but I would say the average viewer is not really paying close attention to, oh, this is 2.4 or 3:1, or this is true anamorphic or 70 millimeter. The average viewer is kind of just drawn into the movie, but they really make it apparent.
Yeah, they really geek out on that. It's pretty awesome because it's also like we were talking about the gradual change in the frame is most people won't even notice it because you're so like into the scene itself that you're actually not seeing the black bars disappear as you're being taken into the world, right? You're already so engrossed that you're not I think that some people will not even notice that aspect ratio change.
Now, even though this film has become synonymous with large format filmmaking, especially in the past year, it wasn't always planned to be shot that way.
He had a really great time shooting with our good friend Rachel Morrison on Fruitvale Station with the Super 16 format. It was something he wanted to kind of get back into and had envisioned this being, kind of a down and dirty shoot where it would have this grit, and it was a good way to get in there and do something with our family of filmmakers. So he actually ended up buying a 16 package that my AC built it out for him. So we were envisioning that was the format, and then I was shooting The Last Showgirl on 16, and I had Panavision make me some lenses for that picture. And so it was very much after reading the script in my mind, envisioning it in that format. And it started to kind of progress as we had more conversations with the visual effects supervisor because of the twinning aspect in the film and the gate weave that you would get kind of with using the 16 millimeter cameras. So the 35 format has a more stable gate and is just more friendly for the kind of work we had to do. So we transitioned to thinking about the movie in 35. And then Ryan got a call from the studio asking if we had talked about large format. And that caused him to kind of, just open his mind up more. And so he gave me a call right after that. And he's like, let's kind of go out there and test and see what's out there. And, let me know your thoughts. And, what about the Hateful Eight format? Because he was interested in showcasing the landscape in that 2:7:6 ratio in order to see just, the vastness of it. And he thought it would be appropriate for the story, but also for that horizon in the South.
Yeah, it's really great when you have filmmakers that decide that one scene isn't married to the last scene. It is its own scene. Like in every time that they make a change, it might be a color palette change. It might be the style. It might be the film that they use that they run through the camera, or the aspect ratio. These are all. If there's intention to it, it's going to be a good choice. I feel in this movie they did a really good job. I remember, Kevin, when you first saw this, you were questioning like some of the wider scenes, if it made it really feel wider or not. And I do think it did. I felt it felt much more grand or important when those changes would take place. I honestly didn't really even notice the aspect ratio changing in this scene because there's so much chaos that's happening and you're traveling through time. So I feel that's obviously also intentional in the fact that they burned the building down afterwards. It's just awesome that they did that. I bet they had like 20 cameras running at that time when they were doing it, would be my guess. So yeah, it's even interesting to see when they choose certain cameras for certain characters. I guess one character, like we saw Remick on those much wider shots earlier. It's a wise choice to be able to, again, inform the audience without letting them actually know that you're informing them.
Yeah, cameras have their own personality too. They start being, distinguished with certain characters and you make that kind of connection. And yeah, you basically have now turned these cameras into a character itself.
And one of our main characters, the villain Remick, and his musical trio in the next scene are going to be approaching the Juke joint. And this is where the horror really kicks into high gear. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to that scene in this episode. Everyone's going to have to tune into our next episode where we cover part 2, the second half of the film Sinners. Now, John and Silvia, as you both know, the second half of this movie is much different than the first half. So how are we feeling about the first half so far?
I love it.
I'm all in. I love everything so far. Well, there's a couple of scary things that I didn't like too much, but overall, not a huge horror, montage. I thought the setup was beautiful. It's not a regular horror movie like, we're going to have a cat run across the screen every 5 minutes, or any of those normal, we're going to go do stupid stuff in the woods and somebody's going to leave for a day. It's all very much a story about the characters and who they are, and the beauty of the shots are just phenomenal. I love the first half of this movie.
I agree. This is establishing the world. We're getting to know these characters, their backgrounds, their relationships. It's so I feel completely like just thrown into this world. I feel like I love all of these characters for all their flaws, for for some of the heaviness of the heart, and some past issues, situations they've got into. I love the story. We're world building here. It's great. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you both anymore. I absolutely love the beginning of this film. The first half is fantastic. The world building, the characters we dive into. I would be happy if there's no vampires in this entire movie. I do love Remick in his introduction scene, but honestly, I would just watch them having the juke joint and dealing with the clan. Even if they make this an episodic thing, give me a trilogy of them just dealing with, the socioeconomic things and all of that that's happening in the Delta here, and the birth of the blues music. I really love the beginning half of this film. But like we said, the second half is going to be much different. And listeners and viewers, that's our show. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching and listening. If you've enjoyed this show, please tune into our next episode when we finish the discussion of Sinners. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and tell a friend. And we'll see you next time on Is It Streaming?